And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Um, most of the people that I see, most of my patients, are people that are usually dealing with really, really serious issues. I facilitate the leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma group for the hospital. So people going through the treatment for blood cancer. I hope that none of you are familiar with them or have had to deal with any of these, because they can really, really be trying and challenging and difficult. And all of these people are my heroes, because one of the things that we really try and make sure is that each and every one of them have a good mind-body connection. And I'm going to talk about why, obviously, and then try and give you some tips that will pare it down to just the things that are most important. Because as I had mentioned to our hosts, this is typically a 2.5 to 3 hour presentation. And to get it in a period of 45 minutes or so, I have to just basically skim the surface. So that's what we're going to do, but we will cover the salient points of it. So the mind-body connection is absolutely a critical and nowadays a mainstream medical issue. It's so important to understand that the way we think, our mind literally controls the quality of our life. And I tell patients all the time when I tease them, you can't fly like an eagle if you're going to behave like a turkey. So a lot of what is going on right now, which is making life very, very difficult. Unfortunately, we see so many people now with severe anxiety issues that are just based on what is happening in our world. The pandemic, the environment, the political situation, the Ukraine situation, the worry about nuclear confrontation, the lack of the country being able to get on the same page with each other, all of these things. And I'm seeing a lot of patients that are in the younger age group that are, say, 20 to 35 or 40, that just have given up, where they say, I just don't feel like there's anything there for me, and I have just kind of lost hope. And when you allow your mind to go in that direction, it's like the tail wagging the dog. You basically lose control of your thought process. And as a result, you open yourself up to an increased possibility of free radicals, which really work on your immune system to lower it. In addition to that, you bring yourself into contact with things like ulcers, diverticulitis, all kinds of stress issues that you typically do not want to have to deal with. And having a good mind-body connection is a major player in making sure that you do the very, very best to stay on an even keel. I know that my cancer patients, I have a protocol for them that I literally insist that they follow, and that's what I'm going to cover with you folks this afternoon. Because we know that when somebody has a good mind-body connection, it has an amazing impact, first of all, on their immune system, where they are able to so much better tolerate the chemotherapy medications, even the treatments for the radiation therapy, even the surgical recovery that they sometimes have to go through. Everything is just put on the fast track if they have a positive thought process. And nowadays, life in general is just hard. There's a lot of bullets flying around out there that those of us that are in the older generation never had to deal with. I went to an inner city high school in Chicago, and I went with blacks and whites and Latinos and Asians and Polish kids and Jewish kids and Italians, and we all figured out how to get along. But the thing that was so noteworthy was that if you did have a problem with somebody, in 4 years, the worst thing I ever saw was some kid get a black eye or a bloody nose. We had no guns, no knives, no drugs, no metal detectors, no cops on campus, none of the stuff that these people have to go through now on a very, very routine daily basis. And then you add to that the digital toxicity that comes from the lack of communication we're seeing, because people are just literally attached and wired to their devices, particularly the younger people, where I've had patients who will have a full-blown panic attack if they forget to charge their stupid iPhone. And you add all of this together, and it just tears at your mind-body connection. So the way to be able to correct that is to just have a few precepts that are absolutely inviolate, that you practice every single day. And when you do that, it makes a world of difference in the way you are able to deal with life. First of all, exposure is one of the most important things. What percentage of the news nowadays is good news? Maybe, if we're lucky, on a really good night, 2%. My wife and I keep ourselves current by watching just one newscast a day, because it covers both the local, national, and international news. And it's David Mrch, ABC World News Tonight from 5:30 to 6, and then we're done. And what we laugh about is it's like watching a horror show, because it's 30 minutes basically of bad news until the very end. He has this little 1-minute segment called America Strong, where he has something positive. But the problem is that so many people have become news junkies. I have patients that watch the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news, then they'll turn it on again at 10 o'clock at night, wanting to go to bed at 10:30. They turn it off and can't understand why they can't fall asleep, and their mind is still roaring like a freight train going down a mountain. And you just cannot do that to your head and expect it to join your body in quiet, peaceful relaxation, allowing sleep to embrace you. So don't become one of these CNN, MSNBC, Fox, or whatever news junkies, where you are constantly looking at your phone or your iPad all day long with every event that happens in the world, most of them being bad, sticking it right in your face. That is one of the first initial things that I absolutely try and drive home to all of my patients, whether they're just emotional trauma patients being seen for anxiety or for depression or a variety of other things, or one of the people in one of my cancer groups, is to just do enough to stay current so you don't feel like you're ignorant of what's going on in the world. Get it over with in 30 or 40 minutes, and then be done with it, and try and maintain that positive mind-body connection. And in the interest of time, I'm going to cut right to the chase and just talk a little bit about these specific things, which is literally just a list that I give to each and every new patient. And I check this with them and examine them for this every single week at every single appointment to make sure that they are following these particular points. And I'm going to give you a medical clinical example, followed by a practical example of what I'm talking about with each one of these, so that if you do want to connect the dots on questions, it makes it a little easier to know exactly what I'm specifically talking about. So the first is, we are finding more and more people right now have totally lost touch with understanding the 3 laws of decision. And that is absolutely crucial. What are they? A lot of people don't even know. The first of which is, when something happens to you that is correctable by you, even if correcting it is going to be a little bit intimidating, scary, embarrassing, whatever, do it right now. We're finding people that have small upsets happen to them, and instead of dealing with it right away on a timely basis, they are letting it mull around in their mind for 2 or 3 days until it becomes this huge elephant in their head that is now so out of control, they don't even know how to approach it. And this is really a mistake, because nothing will invade a positive mind-body connection faster than having something unfinished that you could have dealt with right away going on in your mind. Here's the practical example. I like to use this because it's fairly recent, but more important, I'm in love with this patient. I was referred this 94-year-old woman who is amazing in that she is as sharp as a 35-year-old, and her mobility at 94 years old is downright unworldly. And the reason I said I'm in love with her is because it's been many, many years since anybody has referred to me as Sonny Boy. And that's the way she called me when we introduced ourselves. So at any rate, I happened to see her on a Monday for one of her appointments. And she came in and we had our appointment. And then as I was walking her out to the reception area, I was just making small talk with her. And I said, "So how was your weekend?" "Oh," she said, "it was amazing." She said, "I have this friend staying with me from the East Coast who I've known for 75 years. She said, we've been like sisters our entire lives. And she said, we've had such a good time until this morning, just before I left for your office. We were having the end of our breakfast and she said something to me that shocked me so much and hurt my feelings so bad, it was like being cut off at my knees. And she said, I've decided that when I go home and leave your office, I'm going to ask her to leave and end her trip early." And I said to her, "Well, how did she respond when you questioned her about whatever it was that she said?" She said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." She said, "She knows what she did, and if she wants to make amends, I'll listen, but I am certainly not going to initiate the conversation." I gently put my hand on her shoulder and I kind of spun her 180 degrees. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I changed my mind. We're not finished yet." And I took her back in an exam room and I closed the door and I said, "Here's what you're going to do. I'm going to put you into this really comfy, nice big chair with a telephone and a glass of water, and you're going to call home and you're going to tell your friend that you're on the way home from your appointment and to please put on a pot of water for a cup of tea or some coffee because you have something that's bothering you that you want to discuss with her." And she stood up and she said, "There's no way that's happening. I'm not doing that." And I said to her, "Well, here's the deal." I said, "I own this building." This was in the San Ramon office. I said, "Now, if you want to leave here and go home, you're going to do this. Otherwise, it's perfectly all right. If you want to spend the night, I'll make you as comfortable as I can, but you're going to need to do this task before I let you out of here." And of course, obviously, I was teasing her and she got really annoyed. And the bottom line was, I hung in there and she finally picked up the phone and I stood outside the door and waited until I heard her start to talk to her friend at home. And then I asked for my MA to send in my next patient. And when I left that afternoon for the hospital, I said, "By the way, how did Mrs. So-and-so sound when she left here this morning?" And my medical assistant said, "She sounded a lot better when she left than when she came in." And I thought, great, and I forgot about it, and that was the end of the conversation. That night when I got home, it was a night for the Leukemia Lymphoma Myeloma Clinic, and I didn't get home until about 10 o'clock. And when I called my service for my messages, the operator said, "One of the messages is 9.5 minutes long. Do I have to read it?" And I said, no. I said, "I'll play it when I have a few minutes." And when I did later that night, it went like this. She said, "I'm so happy that I dealt with this right away, blah, 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 blah." She wasn't even talking about my daughter. She was talking about another young woman with the same very unusual name, and we had a total miscommunication. And then she had the nerve to say, "I'm so glad I didn't wait to address this, that I took care of it right away." I didn't even get credit for that, but that's what I'm talking about. Had she not made that phone call, folks, she would have destroyed a 75-year-old precious relationship over a total mistake of miscommunication. You don't want to do that. When something happens that you can fix right now, even if it's a little bit difficult or you feel a little uncomfortable doing it, embarrassed, intimidated, whatever, just put on your big boy girl pants and do it right now. That is worth its weight in gold to have that behind you immediately. The second law of decision is one, unfortunately, which from a medical perspective, we see all the time. Somebody, for example, has to have a potentially scary imaging scan. They get it, say, on a Wednesday like today, and they're supposed to have the results by Friday, but the radiology department is running a little behind and they can't get it until Monday. So come the weekend, they have two options. The first option is to scare themselves to death, thinking the worst and worrying about it and just mulling it over and thinking about all of the bad ramifications that are possible so that they destroy the entire weekend of enjoyment with their family. Or they can learn how to take something that you cannot deal with until a specific future time and put it on the back burner of your brain until it's an appropriate time to deal with it. And this is so easy to learn to do. It sounds like it's difficult, but it's not. I do this with patients all the time. There's a million different methods to do it. I'm going to, in the interest of time, describe one of the easiest. I will lie somebody down on the couch. I will turn the lights down. I will tell them to visualize the little black square stop button on a CD or a DVD player. Everybody knows what that is. And to think of that scary issue that they're dealing with. And as soon as they think of it, to push mentally that stop button and just will that out of their mind. And they do, and it goes away immediately. But of course, it comes right back in 10 seconds. And I tell them to push the button again. And when they're learning to do this, they might have to push that button the first day 35, 40, or 50 times. But in the basic time frame, that's nothing. It doesn't even total 2 minutes. And the end result is that by the second day, they're only having to push it 2 or 3 times. By the time I see them for their next appointment, they typically only have to push it once to shut down that thought that they can't deal with appropriately at that minute until they can find a time when it is able to be dealt with. Very, very important to do. And the results of it are worth its weight in gold because you don't do what we call this anticipatory anxiety of forward thinking. By that, I mean, what happens when they go for the results Monday and they get a wonderful report? The PET scan is totally clear, it's cancer-free, and here they destroyed their entire weekend and their entire mental thought process worrying for 72 hours for nothing. So that's just sheer waste of exhaustion and time for something that turned out positive. So learning how to do that is absolutely paramount. And then the third law of decision, which is really, really important to learn, because I don't care who you are or how old you are, it's going to happen to all of us. That is when you lose something that you love to do because either, in the case of the people that I'm seeing, they either because of their treatment or their surgical procedure or a combination of all of them, they no longer can do a particular sports activity or a particular mind activity or voice activity. They have, again, two options. The first is absolutely terrible, which is to just go back to that world of living on memory lane when they dwell on, I remember when, I wish I coulda, woulda, and just live in the past. It is so profound that medically we actually have kind of picked up a slang term for it, not any, kind of a derisive term, but a term so that very, very short verbiage. If I tell another clinician, so-and-so is living on memory lane, that doctor, he or she knows immediately what I'm talking about, and vice versa. The second option is to accept the fact that you just really enjoyed this particular activity. You had years of doing it, and now it's time to call it quits, and you just have to replace it with something else that's more appropriate that you can do. And I'll tell you, it's hard to do. It happened to me about 5 years ago. I loved tournament slalom water skiing. That's the kind of sport where you go through the slalom course around those balls, and it just is amazing aerobic exercise that takes every ounce of strength and concentration that you have. And doing that a couple of times a week on my day off, which is Wednesday, and again on one of the weekend days, it just washed my mind out with soap and water and just kept me in the best shape of my entire life. And then I had to have a total knee replacement on my right leg. And when I was going for the interview with the colleague who operated on me, he said to me, I want you to make a list of all of the sports activities that you love. So I did. And of course, the tournament slalom water skiing was number one on the list, followed by tennis and hiking and bike riding and all the other stuff I enjoy. He took a red pencil, and the only thing he crossed off was the tournament slalom water skiing. He said, take one bad fall going at that speed, laid out like that, and you're going to reduce the shelf life of that new knee from 35 years to about 15 months. And if you don't want to go through this again, even much more difficult, you're going to need to give up that particular sport. And it was really hard. I actually considered not listening to him because I knew several other people that had had knee replacements that continued to ski, trying to be much more conservative with what they did. But ultimately, several of them wound up getting hurt and having to have a repeat of their surgery. And I finally decided the main thing about this is I need to practice what I preach. And I knew the only way to do this was to divest myself of everything related to it. So I sold my boat. I sold my very, very fancy prescription water ski, gave away all of my gear, and I just put it in the past. And then I found pickleball in addition to tennis. And I found that that not only gave me a terrific additional workout for the week, but I enjoy the social activity of it even more than the tournament water skiing, which is very competitive and not very friendly. So learn to replace things with grace, because eventually you're going to have to, even if you're lucky enough to wait until you have to give up driving at old age, or you have to give up a sports activity because of the lack of ability to just maintain that, given how old you are. It's really good experience to learn how to make that transition early. Those three laws of decision, folks, are absolutely the most valuable tools you can ever put in your quiver along with your other arrows. The other item, and this is one that is so important nowadays, stay out of the atmosphere of negativity. If you find somebody who has this propensity of just wanting to dump on you all the time, every time you see them, they are telling you about everything bad that's going on in the world. You want to divest yourself of that relationship. And that is even more profound nowadays than it's ever been, because people that have a poor mind-body connection, they are able to unload some of this by victimizing people that will listen to them, that they can just constantly be putting this stuff on. Now, I'm not talking about not listening to a good friend who's got a genuine problem or something, or being there for somebody. That is totally different. I'm talking about somebody who has this attitude where if you say, how you doing today? It's a beautiful, beautiful day. And they'll say something like, the day ain't over yet. That's the kind of person you want to stay away from. And sometimes it's hard. If you work with a person like that, if you have to be involved with them in your professional life, or even worse yet, if they happen to be in your family, then what I tell my patients is to do the very best you can to minimize your exposure to that person. Only be with them for as long as is absolutely necessary, and then get out of their sight. I had that happen to me several years ago, and it's really kind of strange because here I, tell patients routinely how important it is not to be involved with people like that. And I kind of got caught up in it myself. I played tennis with a doctor who every single Wednesday in the summertime, we would be standing there on a 90-degree day on a concrete tennis court. And between every point, he would go to the net and he'd motion me over there, and I would go over and meet him. And he would drop some question or some case he was working on, or ask for some opinion about some consultation. And in the middle of a tennis game, when it's blistering out there. And finally, when I woke up after a week or two of this, I said to him, we're both out here to get some exercise and have a good time on our day off. If you want to talk shop, call me later, or call me at home tonight or at the office tomorrow, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. But let's not practice medicine on the tennis court. And he didn't listen. I told him much more firmly, and he still didn't listen. And I divested myself of that relationship. And because we were involved on a collegial basis, I found another consultant to be able to refer patients to in that specialty. So I don't want to be around people like that. Neither should you want to be. It's very, very important. Stay away from negative people. And I will tell you also one more example of this, which really shows how difficult this can be. I have a fairly new patient who's a young woman suffering in the worst stages of treatment for one of the many forms of leukemia. And she came in for her Friday appointment not too long ago, and she looked like she had been hit by a 20-ton truck. And I said to her, you look like you have really, really had a tough week. What is going on? This is new for you. And she said, it's not my treatment. She said, it's my aunt. Let's call her Lucy. She said, my Aunt Lucy. She said, I have breakfast with her every Friday morning. And she said, I have these 2-hour sessions before I come for my appointment with you, where I have to listen to her just talking about nothing but her arthritis and her ills and how hard it is for her to hear and all of this stuff. And she said it wouldn't be so bad, but she said the worst part of it is in that whole hour and a half or 2 hours, she never once asks me how I'm doing with my treatment or how I'm getting along with going through all of this therapy and chemo that I'm dealing with. I said to her, you know what? We're going to fix that right now, real easy. You're going to just call Aunt Lucy and you tell her, with all of your medical appointments and obligations you're going through right now, you can't do these Friday breakfasts anymore for that length of time, that you'll stop by and bring her a bagel and a cup of coffee and spend 20 minutes with her, and you're out of there. And the next Friday, when she came for her appointment, she stood in the doorway and she said, the slaves have been refreed. And it was so easy to do, but you just don't realize it often when you are the one being victimized. So keep your radar on so you don't get caught up in that. The next item is, and there is almost nothing, folks, that is more important than this right now. In this day and time we're all going through, and that is If you don't have a sense of humor, you better go out and get one, because you're going to need it. People are so edgy, so angry, so, I don't even know what to call it, not necessarily intentionally unfriendly, but so short and caught up in so much of their own misery now that a lot of times, like my wife had an experience at the supermarket where she forgot to bring a bag into Safeway from her car. And the woman, she had to purchase a lot of stuff. And the woman said to her, "So were you going to want a bag?" And my wife was just being friendly. She said, "Yeah," she said, "I apologize." She said, "I forgot to bring my grocery sack in from the car." And the woman said, "Like, I don't get that, looking at all of this junk," or something to that effect. And my wife was shocked because the woman was just miserable. And my wife, didn't say anything. And when she came home and she told me that, I said to her, "You could have answered it with something, that was along a humorous vein, like, yeah, today I left half of my brain prior to having my coffee," or something. Don't take those kinds of things to heart, because when you maintain your sense of humor and something negative happens, and instead of just reacting or being hurt or insulted or angered by it, you reach for some humor, it is just the best antidote for that kind of misery that you're going to find. I could tell you a very funny story that happened to me with the California Highway Patrol, but it's a little bit lengthy, takes about 5 minutes, and I don't want to take the time to do it now. But if you don't have a sense of humor, start getting one, because in this day and age, it's going to be very important to have. The next item, nobody likes to hear because you get pounded with it all the time on television commercials, I'm sure by your own doctor and anybody who cares about you. And that is, you have to exercise your mind and your body. The reason that this is so important and that I'm mentioning it is because since the beginning of the pandemic, at the lockdown, a lot of facilities obviously were either closed or people could not go to their gym or wherever they went, that kind of forced them to maintain their physical health. So once everything opened back up, they got into what I call the lazy habit, where they didn't go back to their own prior healthy routine. And then in addition, when all of the food service places, the restaurants and everything also had to go through the lockdown, people started to eat a ton of food just on the basis of convenience at fast food places and have never stopped. So we are all, every clinician and every specialty is seeing a profound weight gain in so many of our patients, not only in the physical fat, but also in the unhealthy escalation of all of their triglycerides and cholesterol and everything else, because they have never reversed those terrible eating habits and they have just stopped moving. Do not do that. You don't have to be a marathoner. You don't have to be Charles Atlas, but everybody deserves 30 minutes out of 24 hours where, if nothing else, just take a walk. This is really easy to do, and all you need is a pair of sneakers and you're good to go. And it can be the best exercise on the planet. If you want to just cover the whole spectrum, get a pair of 2.5-pound weights and start walking with those weights so that you're now doing your upper as well as your lower body. It is what I do routinely 3 or 4 times a week. We live in a community that's right at the base of Mount Diablo. I take a 2-hour, 5-mile hike, 1,200 vertical feet off Mount Diablo. And when I come back from that, It has given me a total upper, lower, and full body workout, and my cardio is just boosted right to the moon because of what it takes to climb that 1,200 feet. So you don't have to do anything like that if you're not into sports and exercise. Then just take a nice 30-minute walk. But don't stop moving because of the pandemic and the fact that you weren't able to go back to the facility that you originally were using to keep your physical health going. That holds true the same way for not only eating, but for your mental health. People that are retired, that lost the ability to do their avocational work because of the pandemic, now it's either no longer available. Like, for example, I'm not talking to you in person somewhere, and they've lost their ability to do that consulting or do whatever it was in person. So they have stopped doing anything to exercise their mind. Remember this little phrase: if you don't lose it, you will, if you don't use it, you will lose it. And that has applied to both your physicality and your mental health. It escalates your submission toward early onset dementia and a variety of other really, really ugly things like Alzheimer's from lack of eating properly and exercising. You don't want to go down that path. So please keep those things in mind. Very, very important. Next item is try and learn to think good thoughts. That nowadays is not always really easy. You have a day when everything seems like it's gone south. The world news is bad. The national news is bad. The weather sucks. You have an incident at work. Something happens where you just feel like you're just being bombarded by negativity. You need to make sure that you're not looking only at the bad stuff. Let me give you an example. I have several patients that when they're going through the very worst of their treatment, sometimes chemotherapy, radiation, and surgical recovery all simultaneously, they are in a lot of pain and misery. And I had one young guy who I said to him, "You look like you are just really in the dumper. What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I want to tell you," he said, "I don't have 1 minute of one day when I have anything happy that makes me feel good." And I said, "Really?" I said, "How about when something happens with your family or something that makes you just feel really upbeat, or just a show that you watch on TV?" He said, "Let me repeat myself. Not 1 minute of one day do I have that kind of a feeling." I said, "Okay." I said, "Here's what we're going to do." I gave him a pad of 8.5 by 11-inch lined notebook paper. I said, "When you go home today, I want you to tear off one sheet, put it on your refrigerator with a magnet, and every time between now and your next appointment, something happens, maybe something that one of your children has done or that your wife does that makes you smile or laugh or makes you happy or proud. I want you to just jot it down in just a word or two or a real short sentence. You don't need to make a big deal out of this." Then he got kind of annoyed. He said, "So you're essentially telling me you want me to take your blank pad of paper home and bring it back blank next week, just the way it is, based on what I've told you?" And I said, "I'll make a deal with you. If that's how it comes back, I won't bother you to do this again." He came back the next week. He had one side completely full, the other side completely full, and he had started on the second page. What happens, folks, is that when we live in this miasma of negativity, we become like a horse with blinders on, where our brain stops seeing outside of the blinders at the good stuff that's happening. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things going on right now, but there's also a lot of really good things that are very, very inspiring, happiness provoking, and positive if you look outside of those blinders. Make sure that you do. Do not get caught up in that world of constant negativity because it just does in indescribable damage to your mind-body connection, which you definitely don't want to do. Next thing, I'm going to kind of combine three things really quickly because we're already ready at 1:45, and I do want to leave time for questions or for anybody that has anything that is specific to something that I might not have covered. So one of the most mainstream therapies that we use now, particularly for cancer, and all 5 of the top cancer institutes in the United States, Sloan Kettering Memorial, the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, UCSF, Stanford, and a myriad of other facilities of gold star ranking, use music therapy. Music therapy is absolutely one of the main ingredients in helping people keep a real positive mind-body connection. I use it for every single cancer patient that I have. I have them get into a real comfortable chair. If they don't have a recliner or a lazy boy or something like that, I have them lie down, turn the lights down low, get a pair of over-the-ear, real comfortable headphones, not the earbuds that stick in your ears and you're always aware of, but those nice cushy over-the-ear phones, which are very inexpensive if you go to Target or Walmart or a place like that, and connect it to a music player, your phone, or any device where you have your music. I don't care whether you're a fan of long hair opera or acid metal rock or anything in between. Put on your favorite music at a low volume, sit down in that chair, and just do 15 minutes of guided imagery while you are doing cleansing breathing. Cleansing breathing is one of the most beneficial things you can do to just lower all of your bad chemistry, like cortisol, which is an inflammatory hormone that is the first thing we test for when it's suspected that a patient has had a coronary, because it just shows all of the inflammation in the blood that attacks every soft tissue organ. And things like, excuse me, adrenaline, that's a fight or flight hormone. When you are stressed, all of these chemistries are just raging at that level, which is the personification of unhealthy. When you do deep breathing, along with letting your mind go to one of your places, which I'm going to describe in a second, it is the best medicine in the world to bring down that level of stress and just put you on a level playing field, allowing everything to relax, absorb your music and enjoy it, and just focus on positivity. First, about the breathing. Any of you that have taken an aerobics class or a spin class or any kind of heavy exertion exercise, very often the instructor will say, we're going to start by taking 3 or 4 nice, big, deep cleansing breaths. But they don't explain what that is. Many of them don't even know where the term came from. Cleansing breath is a medical term. When you live, as we all do here in the Bay Area, right at sea level in this very oxygen-rich atmosphere, you are barely breathing. We are all like a couple of millimeters away from rigor mortis because we're only using about 20% of our total vital capacity. If you were to compare a set of our lungs with, say, a person who lived in the Himalayas, our lungs would look like they came from a dwarf because we never expand or exercise them. When you take 8 or 10 big, deep, diaphragmatic cleansing breaths, where you fill up your lungs with as much air as they can handle and then gently let the air out, you flush all of that excess nitrogen and carbon dioxide from your bloodstream. Both of those gases are harmless, and they fill up that 80% of unoccupied space, because our lungs need to stay fully inflated so that we don't have a lung collapse, which is called a pneumothorax. And those gases, while they're harmless, they are the enemy of relaxation. So when you take 8 or 10 of those big, deep cleansing breaths, you evacuate all of that excess CO2 or nitrogen, and you give your bloodstream a total resurgence of fresh oxygen, which just allows everything to quiet down. The music allows your mind to just open up and lets you focus on your place. And your place is any place you want it to be, either real or totally contrived by your imagination, as long as your place meets these 3 criteria. It's got to be a place where you feel happy and joyful being there, maybe a gorgeous white sand, crystal clear water beach on some beautiful island that you've been to on vacation at some time, or some other place that just gives you total happiness. Or maybe you're just going to contrive it with your imagination, a place that you hope will look like that when you actually get there. Either way makes no difference, as long as that place meets these 3 standards. It's got to be a place, as I said, where you feel totally joyful and happy. It's got to be a place where you feel completely safe and secure. And it's got to be a place where you feel totally unrushed and unhurried. Other than that, it can be any place you think of, real or imaginary. You focus on that place while you are doing deep breathing and letting that music perforate your earphones on a very low level, all at the same time. And I guarantee you, when you get out of that chair or off of that couch, you will feel, as my patients often say, like they've had a $450 spa treatment. I insist that my cancer patients do this every single day for 15 minutes. I'm suggesting that you guys do it for 2 or 3 minutes a few times a day, which is a total of 6 or 7 minutes out of 24 hours, which is nothing. And it can make an amazing difference in how you feel. Finally, learn to change what you can. And as I said, deal with it right away and recognize what you can't change, and don't allow it to turn into frustration. I'd love to cover some of these other things, which are how to stay young, throw out non-essential numbers. They are just that, just age. Don't listen to somebody that says you're going to, your lifespan is only such and such. I've had patients like that 94-year-old on a routine basis that are still vital. Keep only cheerful friends. Keep learning. Challenge your mind. Don't stop stretching yourself to the edge to learn how to do new things. Very, very important. Laugh long and hard. A couple of minutes a day of laughter can literally add several years to your life. And I've made a list of items that just go on and on and on. But now I've eaten up 10 minutes of our chat time, so I'm going to shut my big mouth and turn it back to Chris.